Hi everyone, welcome back. So today it's a little bit past my 1-year anniversary of publishing my very first novel, Spellbound. And in honor of that, I decided I wanted to talk about some of the things that I've learned in my very first year of self-publishing. I'm going to start with timelines because this is the most important. If you are planning on publishing a book sometime soon, I would write out a timeline, put down whatever you think each thing is going to take, and then add a certain amount of weeks to whatever you think it's going to take. Because in my case, I had a timeline written out, but I didn't have any buffer time in case something happened, like if I got swamped at work or if somebody had an illness, and that ended up really making me go down to the wire towards the end. I didn't have the right amount of time planned out for editing and cover art, etc. And that ended up causing me problems. So first thing, timelines. Have a timeline. Have some buffer time built into that timeline. And don't be too strict on yourself if you don't hit that deadline. For your first book especially, I probably wouldn't recommend putting like a super strict deadline, because what I did is I had booked a booth at an anime convention and the book wasn't ready yet. So I had to rush to get everything done before the convention so I wouldn't show up empty-handed. So that was like lit a fire under me to really get everything done, but it also caused me a good amount of stress. So know your level of stress tolerance and know what kind of deadline is going to work for you, and then just stick to that deadline. But also don't stick to a deadline that's going to lessen the quality of the book that you produce. The next thing I want to talk about that I learned about was editors. With my first book, I quite frankly did not know what I was doing when I picked out editors. One of the editors just, while they were pretty good, they didn't work within the timeline that I genuinely needed based on what I was trying to get done. And that ended up costing me later because that gave me less time to apply those editing changes. So that was one mistake I made. Make sure whoever you pick for your editor is going to get it done in the time frame that you need it done. So if you need something done within 4 weeks, probably don't pick the editor that gets things done in like 2 to 3 months. So just be aware of your deadlines when you're picking your editors. The other thing is be aware of what type of editing you need. One thing I realized is I didn't really need as much line editing as I thought. So I spent a lot of money on line editing, but honestly, looking back, I kind of liked this. I kind of think a lot of it could have been done with a program and with myself. And then also, while their edits were good, it didn't really fit my personal style. Also be aware of what kind of style you want if you're going to go with line editing. Now I have a couple of editors that I really like that I'm sticking with. I think in the future, I'm probably not going to do as much line editing. Mostly I need help with keeping events and things like that straight in my head. So developmental editing is where I tend to spend the most money. Figure out what kind of editor you end up needing the most, whether that's if you know you need a developmental editor the most or a line editor. I would recommend for anyone to always have a proofreader if possible, because that's one of the least expensive kinds of editing. So when you go ahead and give your work to them for a sample, be aware whatever sample you get from them, that's probably the best quality you're going to get. So if you're not happy with the sample, probably don't go with that editor. I made that mistake a couple times before. So that would be it for editing. The next thing I wanted to mention is marketing. I feel like I did do a lot of things right because I was looking at what other people did and figuring out my marketing. The issue was I was figuring out my marketing as I went. If I could do everything over, I probably would have looked into marketing sooner rather than later. I did purchase a lot of things to like help me plan out the marketing, but that was within a couple of months before the book was getting published. And at this point, like some of the stuff that I needed to do, I would have had to do 6 months before publication, like if I wanted to be in Library Journal, for instance, and get an editorial review through them. When you do your marketing plan, kind of be aware with the timeline for publication, because some of that marketing stuff might have to be planned out really far in advance. Like for this new book with Hidden Gems, I realized that they book out really, really fast. So if I wanted to get a spot with them, I needed to book it super far in advance. And it's still, I'm not going to get my Hidden Gems promotion until March of next year. So just be aware when you're planning out your marketing. Some of it's going to need to be planned out really, really far in advance. Some of it's 6 months or more. Like if you're doing Hidden Gems or Library Journal. Hidden Gems is basically what I'm using to get reviews. It's a kind of a service where they put it up and people can get review copies. So it's a way of distributing your book to reviewers. And the other thing that I learned was that while anime cons worked particularly well for me marketing-wise, the library, while it was great for meeting people, didn't really do so much as far as sales go for me. The only event that I found that was in person that really worked out well for me was the anime convention, and I think I ended up selling about 25 or so copies. And I also got very lucky because the particular booth I had was right in the line to get to like the signings and the food, so it was a very high traffic area as well. Depending on your genre, if you're fantasy especially or sci-fi, you might have some pretty good luck with anime cons and marketing at anime cons. Next thing I want to talk about is reviewers and beta readers. So something that I recently, like very recently realized is I should have been giving some sort of leading question when I sent out drafts to beta readers, because if you don't give them a leading question, they might not know how to word things to you. So just giving simple leading questions like, what did you think about that character? Did you like the characters? Did you like these two characters' relationship? If it's got romance, or if it's a romance, you could ask what they thought about the ending, etc. But just giving a few questions for those beta readers so they have some idea of what you're looking for. Because I did not do that with the first book, and I probably should have done that because I needed that specific feedback to really help level up the manuscript. The other thing I wanted to mention for reviews is give your reviewers plenty of time, because I chunked out what I thought would be plenty of time for my reviewers, and it was not enough time for them. It was a very short novella, and I think I gave them a month to a month and a half. But in reality, usually you might want more than that, like 2 or 3 months, depending on the length of the novel. So just plan for that when you're sending things out to reviewers, and be aware that's about how long it might end up taking them. The other thing is, once you have that in the reviewer's hand, you still want to follow up with them, even if you're using something like BookFunnel that does it automatically. I found that sometimes the automatic one, because it's not as personal, people are less likely to pay attention to that reminder. So in addition to the one that they get from BookFunnel, I will usually reach out, depending on where I met them, maybe on Facebook Messenger, or I'll send them a quick email if I notice that they still haven't reviewed, and I'll just be like, hey, I just wanted to check in, see how the reading's going. And this will give them a chance to not only let you know if they didn't like it, so that way you can stop bothering them, or let you know that, oh yeah, I loved it and I'm going to go review it in the next few days. So it might just be that little push that they need, because people forget things. I know I forget things. So you definitely want to follow up with your reviewers. That was just something that I ended up learning along the way, because I was like, no, people aren't going to forget. I don't need to follow up on this. And then I realized very quickly that was not the case. And when I followed up, I started having a lot more people go through with those reviews. And the last tip I'm going to have is have multiple sources of where you're getting your reviews from, because you might need it. Sometimes you're only going to get 2 or 3 reviews from one source, but you might get 5 or 10 reviews from another source. For me, I use a lot of different sources, and I'm still adding to this day. Right now, some of the ones that I've used are, I did the free trial with Pubbie. I decided it wasn't worth it to pay because it's like $20 a month for one review. And then pretty much after that, you have to pay or read a bunch of books to get more points to get more reviews. So to me, Pubby wasn't worth it, but I did use the free trial and was able to get a review that way, which was nice. The other sources I've used are Booksprout. I usually get about 1 or 2 reviews from there, and they're pretty decent. And I've also gotten reviews through a lot of Facebook groups, mostly YA fantasy readers and YA Bookstop. However, places that I have not gotten a lot of reviews from has been Twitter and Instagram. So I haven't had a lot of luck with getting reviewers on social media. Occasionally you might get 1 or 2 people from the writing community that'll just buy the book outright and review it. So I have gotten 1 or 2, but not a ton. And my last tip for reviews, editorial reviews. I spent way too much money on this. Unless you are feeling super confident in your manuscript, probably don't pay for editorial reviews. There are a lot of free ones out there that you can start with. And then if you like the response you got from those editorial reviews, then maybe move on to the ones that cost a lot of money. Like the ones that I'm using that are free right now are Indies Today, and then I also use Neoleaf. So those ones are completely free. And then you could also get lots of reviews from bloggers. Next thing I want to talk about that I really ended up learning about the hard way was budget. For your first novel especially, have a budget in mind, and I would definitely recommend starting low instead of starting high. You usually want to start on the lower end for your budget and then work your way up. I'm not saying that you have to make your cover yourself or anything, but you don't want to be like me and spend $4,000 on your debut novel because that's just not a good idea. Not a good idea. I would basically say the main places where you can really save money are buying ISBNs in bulk, buying a formatting software like Vellum, or having it formatted by someone that has Vellum for cheap. You can probably find someone to do that on Fiverr. I would also recommend saving money on a cover by either finding an inexpensive pre-made cover, or you could find some less expensive custom covers. Try to find one that like fits within the genre, but otherwise probably want to stick in the cheaper realm for covers. I think I spent, with all of the modifications and everything that ended up getting made, it ended up being around $500, but it was a completely hand done cover and it looks absolutely gorgeous. But definitely there were a couple of things where I should have spent less money. Mostly with marketing. I spent way too much money on marketing before I had enough reviews to really have any business doing that. Next thing I want to talk about is consistency. It's really important when you're publishing to be consistent, both with covers and genres and ideally subgenres, which I'm kind of just, I kind of naturally tend to stick to the same genres and subgenres. I don't flop around a lot. Mostly I do a lot of young adult, fantasy, specifically a lot of fairy tales, legends, and mythologies. So I like to do like Arthurian fantasy, etc. So I'm pretty consistent with that. But I hopped around a lot with cover designing, and now that I'm doing like a really big series and I have 3 different cover designers for the same series, I'm going back and looking at this like, why did I do this to myself? Don't know. So just consistency, especially with covers, even if it's just the font or like the style, try to be as consistent as possible. Like at the very bare minimum, like they should look like they belong in the same genre and looks vaguely similar. Mine do not even look vaguely similar in some cases, so I am probably going to have to go back and do like a complete change for several covers. So one thing I learned, be consistent, especially with your cover art. Last thing I'm going to cover is to have a street team. I did not have this in the beginning and I'm slowly building it now. That means like having people that are going to help you promote for your cover reveals, book releases, etc. These could be people that you know on your newsletter, people that you know from social media. It can be anyone that's just interested in helping you promote your book. And once you have more followers on social media, this will be a little bit easier. If you're like me and you had 0 social media following going into this, then it's a little bit more difficult. The main way that I ended up building my street team is just interacting more in reader groups, because I do read a lot, and being more a part of the reading community as well as the writing community. And the last thing I want to talk about, building your mailing list and fan base. I, at the beginning of this, did not have any sort of mailing list. I did not have any sort of fan base. So I had to essentially build from the ground up. I didn't even have Twitter. I had maybe 30 followers when I first started. And then I joined the writing community and I tried to be as active as possible. And now I think I'm at around 2,000 something followers. So I did build a good bit in that 1 year. But if I had started sooner, I probably would have been a little bit better off than I am today. And the other thing I didn't do in the beginning was have a mailing list. And at first, when I was building it, the only people I had on the mailing list in the very beginning were from going to an anime convention. And then I was able to build my mailing list a little bit from the library events that I went to. So I had some people sign up that way as well. And that helped build my mailing list. And I didn't start doing BookFunnel until, I want to say, a few months in. I want to say maybe I was 3 or 4 months in, and I was very resistant because I didn't want to pay the money for BookFunnel, but it's been so worth it. I'm close to 1,200 people on my mailing list now, and a good majority of them were from BookFunnel. Some of them were from giveaways. I think the owner of the group that I'm in, I don't remember the name of the group, but the owner of the group's Courtney Cannon. And they do some group promotions, and that's helped me build my newsletter a little bit as well. And then I did something on Fiverr to build my newsletter. So my recommendation would be start building your newsletter sooner rather than later. A lot of people now that I have a couple of things out are asking to sign up for the newsletter. Before it was kind of like very difficult to get people because I didn't have anything out. Now that I actually have some works out, it's a little bit easier. And that's all I have for you today. If you like this video, go ahead and click that like button and subscribe to my channel down below. And let me know what you've learned so far in your publishing journey, whether you're a few months into it or a few years into it. That's all for today. Thanks. Bye.